Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Good news. Good news for jobs and the economy arrived again last week, both nationally and right here in the Carolinas. Unemployment rates continue to drop, with new jobs being added in a healthy mix of sectors, including technology, transportation, and manufacturing. But what about those who continue to struggle with long-term unemployment? With significant cuts to their benefits, questions about labor force participation rates, and broader social and economic policy issues. Welcome to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Diane Bailey, filling in for Chris William. Today, we welcome back to the program Dale Folwell, who heads the North Carolina Division of Employment Security. Our conversation will take us behind the numbers and into the future of employment opportunity in the Carolinas. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 8, 2014. On this week's program, Kathy Almond from the Stanley County Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Greg Rutherford from York Technical College, and special guest Dale Folwell of the North Carolina Department of Commerce.
Welcome, Kathy and Greg. Appreciate you being here with us today. I omitted any reference to the Great Recession in the opening comments because I think we all want to believe that that chapter is at least closing. Kathy, tell us a little bit about how you and the members of your chamber are feeling about the region's economy, and what factors do you see behind the continued progress in the employment rates?
Well, I think regionally we're all seeing improvement, and definitely in Stanley County. When we look at the unemployment rates as they were compared from June of 13 to June of 14, Stanley County is actually at about 2.5% greater drop than some of the other areas. So Stanley County's done a good job in trying to overcome some of the recessionary unemployment issues. I would say our chamber members as a whole are cautiously optimistic. We've seen a few drops in membership, but we've also seen new members and many renewing members. So I think being able to retain those ongoing members is key and critical. So those businesses are beginning to hire. They're beginning to grow some, and that's really important.
Great. Greg, I want to bring you into this conversation. Really exciting things happening in your region. Boeing, for example, just announced the new Dreamliner assembly project. The GD Tire, another plant with 1,700 jobs in Chester County. How do these announcements, combined with the expansion of the BMW facility in Greenville and other growth in the manufacturing sector, impact the state's technical colleges? And specifically, how is York Technical College aligning your curriculum with the workforce needs?
The reality is that it's a great opportunity for the state and for the region, to be honest with you. I mean, only states pay attention to state lines in reality. The companies and the employees are moving back and forth, and it's a vibrant regional economy that's operating up and down the I-77 corridor and using the Port of Charleston and the great transportation network that we have locally. The technical colleges, as I'm sure are true of the colleges here in North Carolina, find themselves with their dream, their opportunity to do what they love to do. It's in the DNA, quite honestly, and that is to help people find employment that provides a better way of life for them and that keeps the economy moving forward and growing. The obvious reality is that when large numbers are needed by new employers is that it does create a strain on resources and people. I would say that we're doing a valiant job in meeting those demands because the proof is in the reality that they keep coming and that Boeing did choose to move ahead with its new production in South Carolina. The long-term perspective is that we have to find a way to balance the resource needs that we have with the growth of the economy, and we definitely want to continue to do our part to see it continue to improve. And unemployment coming down is a good sign of that, and we hope to stay away from an increase in that area.
I appreciate those observations. Clearly, education is key to attracting and retaining employers in our region. Transportation infrastructure is a key part to that as well, Kathy. And I know you've been very carefully watching this issue and monitoring how changes with the Department of Transportation's funding priorities and allocation strategies. Talk with us a little bit about how you've seen that impact Stanley County.
Well, I recently attended a meeting at the Charlotte Chamber, and of course there's a huge focus on the I-77 corridor and 485, those projects, and we do need to alleviate some congestion in those urban areas. But some of the other continuation projects, four lanes, especially in Stanley County, our Highway 2427 project actually didn't look like it was going to still get enough points to consider funding for this year. That project has entered into the western part of Stanley County from Mecklenburg County, which has been a huge economic boon to western Stanley County. We've seen that area of the county grow tremendously, and the project is slated to continue on eastward from Albemarle to the Montgomery County line. So that's been very, very important. I just had a conversation with one of the engineers with NCDOT this week, as a matter of fact, and he said we can't guarantee anything, of course, but the points are there to keep the project hopefully competitive, and we'll see the continuation of that corridor project as it travels on through Stanley County. Keeping the urban areas connected to the rural areas is going to be key. I mean, when we've got 60% of our voters living in 20% or 20 of our counties, we've got to be able to keep traffic flowing into those rural areas, and for our companies and our employers to survive, they've got to be able to get their product in and out of the rural counties into the urban centers as well and to the interstates.
Well, it sounds like it's another example of cautious optimism.
Optimism.
On behalf of you
yes.
and your chamber members. Let's talk a little bit about the budget that was recently approved. To what extent did the budget align with your priorities for this legislative session, and what are you really looking to see in the 2015 budget?
Well, I would say that I'm grateful that the community college and the teacher salaries were approved and increased. Mm-hmm. I think that's a long time in coming and is very critical in Stanley County as well as many other counties throughout the region and the state. It's very important that we retain good quality teachers. Educating our workforce throughout all of those years is so important. And as Greg mentioned about educating the workforce in the community college system, we've got to have good quality teachers with a good wage in order for them to be able to educate those students and provide a workforce for companies to come here in the future as well.
Greg, the legislative agenda, are you seeing them providing adequate support for the technical colleges, or what opportunities are you looking for?
There are always questions about what is adequate, and I think that often the perspective is that if it's coming from me as being inadequate, then well, that's what he's supposed to say. I don't think that money is the answer, but it does cost to educate. And in our business with the employers that are coming, and in reference to the alignment issue, these companies are advanced. These companies have high expectations, and they want speed. They want to move quickly, and they want to be thorough, and they want to have a great deal of confidence that that system, that pipeline is going to be there. Colleges in North Carolina and South Carolina are able to achieve that in the community and technical field primarily by having a local board that the president, administration report to. They are ingrained in the community. They have jobs in the community. They're from different sectors and different geographical areas. That keeps the college grounded in its local needs, and then those colleges can work together as a network across the state in order to support. The reality is that you won't find many legislators, I doubt, probably anywhere in the country, but certainly not in South Carolina, that have anything but good things to say about technical and community colleges.
Absolutely.
To some degree, though, the tendency is that if you get it done, then you let them do it.
I understand
and maybe the
that.
money's not quite there sometimes.
And I suspect that our special guest, Dale Folwell, will have an opinion as well. So let's bring him into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Next week on our program, we are honored to welcome a panel of mayors from cities across the Carolinas. South Carolina mayors Steve Benjamin of Columbia and Stephen Wukila of Florence, and North Carolina Mayor Esther Manheimer of Asheville. And today, Dale Folwell is here to discuss his leadership of the North Carolina Division of Employment Security. Dale is no stranger to this program or to any of us. He's the former Speaker Pro Tem of the North Carolina House of Representatives and a 4-term member of the North Carolina General Assembly. Now, what may interest you most about Dale, however, is that he holds a world record for the most miles driven on a motorcycle in 1 month, 32,978. Dale, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dale, I understand that you've got a prop for us. So if you could guide us through the analysis of the numbers.
Well, thank you. And, you know, people don't wake up in the morning thinking about unemployment taxes in North Carolina or South Carolina. But it's been a big issue for our state, as this graph will show you. 2 years ago, North Carolina had the 3rd highest amount of debt in the United States. We owed the federal government $2.8 billion because we had overspent our unemployment trust fund. And the result of that is the General Assembly has made policy decisions to change the benefits for North Carolinians, but this is also how it impacts North Carolina employers. Every employer in the United States has to pay 0.6% of their first $7,000 of payroll, and that's what this first teacup represents. And North Carolina employers also had to pay 0.6%. But every year that debt was outstanding, the federal government added 0.3% cumulatively to the unemployment taxes of North Carolina companies. And the reason that that's important is, as you can see by these teacups, is that the cost of doing business in North Carolina far exceeded the cost of doing business in any of the border states. So once this debt is paid off, these surcharges go away. And we're expecting this debt to be paid off next year, so that now North Carolina businesses will be paying the same amount of unemployment tax to the federal government as the other businesses in 40 other states. This will put us on a level playing field. And every time that someone goes from being unemployed to being employed, not only is that less money being taken out of our trust fund, but that's also more premium coming in, which makes our trust fund even stronger. So this whole process has been a combination of changes in policy, which were endorsed by Governor McCrory and Secretary Decker and instituted by the General Assembly, people of our agency who have really worked on getting it right as far as getting claims paid on a timely basis and cutting down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And so it's people and it's policies and it's processes, the things that we have found that we can save money to speed up how we administer these claims has been remarkable, and all that credit goes to the people of our agency.
Stanley County surely has a perspective on this. Kathy, why don't you share that and ask Dale a question or two?
Well, I asked Dale earlier before we got here on the set today, I said, I know that I said in a job link meeting a couple years ago, or within the last 12 to 18 months, and was truly blown away by the fact that North Carolina ranked third in the nation in UI debt to the federal government. You know, I guess it's just not something that we stop and think about. And so you say within the next year we should have that down?
Yes, our peak debt was $2.6 billion.
Okay.
As we sit here today, we have paid off $1.8 billion of that. So we have just a few hundred million to pay off, and that will be occurring in the first half of 2015. And the reason this teacup example is important is that if I pay off that debt anytime before November of next year, these FUTA taxes, the federal unemployment taxes that all the for-profit private employers pay, goes down to what it is in the other 41 states retroactively back to January 1. This will result in almost a $300 million tax break for North Carolina employers because they have been paying these surcharges for years. In addition to this, they've paid $260 million in interest on this debt. North Carolina employers have paid $260 million in interest. So this debt will go down in 2015, giving businesses certainty so they can invest that money to hire more people so there'll be less unemployed people.
So
Dale?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, if we were ranked at number 3, where do we stand now?
As we sit here this morning, we're standing at number 8, but we're falling dramatically. There's no state in the United States that has defeased this debt at the speed that North Carolina has defeased it, and I think it's going to make a big difference going forward for employment.
Greg, please jump in here from the perspective of the technical colleges.
Certainly. Mr. Secretary, you were speaking earlier about the borders, and you're talking about creating a level playing field, and I would certainly be trying to do the same thing if I were in your shoes. I'm wondering, what do you think a level playing field will look like, and to what degree does this issue of unemployment tax affect the ability to be on a level playing field?
Great question. In your opening comments, you talked about business doesn't know where the state borders are. But the fact is business do know which states have the high cost and low cost place to do businesses. I think this will obviously make us competitive because this FUTA tax is something that every HR director is familiar with, every chief financial officer and every CEO that's making a decision whether to expand their business or to come to North Carolina. So I think that's going to make a big impact. But when you combine that with the NC Works, the Workforce Solution offices that my counterpart Will Collins is running, my job is to pay claims to people who deserve those claims and to do it correctly the first time. He's in the employment business. And what I'm most excited about is that the next few years in North Carolina, they're going to be talking more about the reemployment opportunities of North Carolinians. All North Carolinians want the opportunity to have a job. And when Secretary Decker asked me to come on, she was very clear that if it's one phone call that's not answered in our agency, that's one too many. If it's one case that's sitting around too long, that's one too many. If it's $1 a debt that's outstanding, that's one too many. And on behalf of the governor, I will tell you that he strongly feels like that if there's one North Carolinian who doesn't have a job, who wants a job, that's also one too many.
Dale, I'm glad that you turned the conversation back to the claimants. And can you talk with us a little bit about how questions about the labor participation rate may or may not impact the overall unemployment rate? There's been a lot of discussion about that, not only here regionally, but also in the national press.
Well, the unemployment rate, if you ever look at how it's actually created and then try to re-dissect it, it's pretty confusing. But the fact is that a lot of the drop-off in the labor force is associated with people my age. And I'm seeing it happen in my building, where people work for the state for 30 years and they graduated from high school and then graduated from college when they were 22, and now they're, I'm 52 or 55, and they're deciding to actually not be employed because they've decided to retire. So whether it's conservative or liberal opinions of this, that accounts for somewhere between 50 and 70% of what people refer to as the drop-off in the labor force. But what that does is it makes us focus on what I said a few moments ago. If there's one North Carolinian, instead of looking at statistics and percentages, if there's one North Carolinian who wants a job who doesn't have a job, that's one too many, and that's where our DWS NC Works offices are really playing a major role, because folks like the Chamber of Commerce's across North Carolina and the Workforce Solution offices, they have their finger on the pulse of who needs what. You know, my hobby's motorcycles. You know, our local Workforce Solutions offices can tell you which shop may need a mechanic and which doesn't. So they really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on with the local labor markets. And this is making a huge difference going forward for North Carolinians.
Kathy?
I think cutting our federal debt is so important, and again with those Workforce Solutions offices. I work very closely with our Economic Development Division at Stanley Community College and the NC Works project that we've got going on. I think the fact that we're going out all over the state of North Carolina with NC Works and visiting 1,000 companies in 100 days or 100 counties and visiting those folks, seeing what they need, what type of training they need at the community college levels, how quickly can you make that happen, and what are their skills that are required. Those are the important things that we're looking at, and working on scheduling visitations now to go out, retaining those businesses that we've got and growing what they've been able to do and satisfying their needs.
It's really working well, and the local Workforce Solutions offices has helped us over the last 4 months implement a photo ID plan. Previously, people could file for unemployment on the computer, and they never had to verify they were who they said they were. Now, within the first 4 weeks, as an effort to get people into local offices to figure out where the job opportunities are, they have to come in and present their work search documents that show they've been looking for work, which is one of the requirements for drawing unemployment, and they have to produce an ID. And the reason that's important is that you cannot get a job in the United States under the Homeland Security laws without producing a photo ID. So if it's a requirement for employment, it should be a requirement for unemployment. And people coming into local offices and showing us that they are who they said they were when they filed these claims is really cutting down on waste, fraud, and abuse.
Greg, we've got about 2 minutes, but do you have another question for Dale?
Well, I'm just wondering, all of us in the public sector are trying to reduce our costs and increase efficiencies, and it sounds like that you're on track to do that. Does the administration's perspective on outsourcing and privatization have any impact in your particular area?
It doesn't. Obviously, most of the news regarding the Department of Commerce has to do with the PPP and how that relates to job incentives and job recruitment. It's not impacting us. Our entire operation is funded from taxes from employers. We get lots of calls into our call center by claimants who say, I want my benefit because I paid these taxes. Every dollar that comes in our building, every dollar that goes to repay this debt, every dollar that goes to build up the surplus, and every dollar for my salary and everybody in our building comes from the employers of North Carolina. And the reason that's important is that people need to realize that this is basically an insurance company. We take in premiums and we pay out claims. And we do it with 4 principles. We do it with integrity, ability, passion, but compassion for the unemployed. There's someone out there who's waiting on this check, who deserves this check, and needs to know that when we send it to them, that it was done correctly. But the ideas that are coming from people inside of our agency, an idea recently that cut $68,000 in postage cost. The ideas that are coming from all departments of DES are truly astounding, and we're going to start putting all those in one little summary so you can see what
Excellent.
The changes are.
Never enough time. Thank you for being with us today. It's a pleasure. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. And until next week, we wish you all the best. See you next week.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.